Hello my friends, and welcome to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Lindy. I have lots of books to tell you about. I've finished 9 since my last video, so I won't say a lot about each one, and I also have biblio-adventures to tell you about before I even talk about the books. Starting with this great panel that I watched on Tuesday, and it is available online on YouTube, so I will link to it below. There were 5 book cover designers. These are all women who had designed the covers for the 5 books on the shortlist for Canada's Giller Prize. So interesting. I'll just tell you about a little bit about one of the covers, the winning book for the Giller Prize last year, The Sleeping Car Porter by Suzette Mayer. So we saw how they worked with different fonts, and also there's this subtle train schedule that's layered in the background. And Ingrid Paulson, the designer, said that originally she had found a more recent train schedule, not for the era of the novel, which is the 1920s, and Suzette Mayer was the one who tracked down the correct era of train schedule, which is the one that's in the background on the cover. One of the audience questions had to do with why there are different covers in different countries. Yeah, so if you're interested in that kind of stuff, I highly recommend that you watch this video. I also compiled my January reading stats. I do that on my blog. I read 46 books in January, and if you're interested in that kind of thing, I'll just include a link to my blog down below. I do have a roundup of my favorite titles from January. We're on to the books now. Jessica John's chapbook, How Not to Spill. This was a reread for me, and I picked it up because her debut novel, Bad Cree, has just come out this month. As a matter of fact, I have started listening to it in audiobook. I'm halfway through and loving it. She's also an excellent poet, and we had our literary salon just on Wednesday, the monthly salon where a group of us gather together and read poems to each other. And one of the ones that I read was from this book. I'm going to read you a different one, a really short one. I Fell in Love on Twitter, which, if you didn't know, is the worst place to fall in love or lust, to be earnest and funny and Cree and queer and every other beautiful thing. Jessica Johns is a queer Cree writer from northern Alberta. She now lives in Vancouver, as far as I know. And I'll be talking about Bad Cree in my next video. In a recent video, I talked about the graphic novel Who Owns the Clouds, which is written by Mario Brassard and illustrated by Gérard DuBois. A couple of my subscribers, Shelley Swearingen and Dia, both mentioned how much they love Gérard DuBois' work. Both of those women have booktube channels, by the way, so I'll link them down below. Anyway, I was inspired to pick up more by DuBois and also to look at his work online, which is how I found out that the Folio Society has commissioned him to do illustrations for a number of their books, including a gorgeous edition of Cormac McCarthy's The Road. And DuBois has also illustrated a Canadian stamp. I love going down these sorts of rabbit holes, and it also means that's why I picked up this book that DuBois illustrated, Monsieur, Marceau. It is a picture book biography of Marceau, and it's written by Leda Schubert. What really struck me in this book is Marceau's work in the French Resistance. For example, he led hundreds of children to safety by taking them over the Alps into Switzerland from France. His father died in the concentration camps. He said, "The people who came back from the camps were never able to talk about it. My name is Mangel. I'm Jewish. Perhaps that unconsciously it contributed towards my choice of silence." And DuBois' illustrations really capture the joy and appeal of Marceau across the years and across the world. Next up is a graphic novel for adults, Waves. Now, the author is Ingrid Chabbert, who's a very prolific children's book author in France. The illustrations are done by Carole Maurel. And this one is based on Chabbert's own experiences. She and her wife were expecting a child, and you can probably guess by the fact that there's a pregnant woman on the cover, and knowing that this story is about grief, that grief has something to do with pregnancy. I liked that this story wasn't about the trials of a lesbian couple getting pregnant, but more about after. And it's also very much about how we move through grief and move on towards something new in our lives. Very, very well done. Really emotional illustrations too. The translation is by Edward Gauvin. And next up is the first 2 volumes of a graphic novel series, again from France, but this time set in the 26th century in Paris. It's by Kid Toussaint, who's French, and the illustrator is Andrés Garrido, who lives in Madrid. The series is called Love, Love, Love. Volume 1 is Yeah, 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 and Volume 2 is Bang, Bang, Shoot, Shoot. Translation done by Montana Kane. Now, this is the story of a robot, artificial intelligence, and a woman. They fall in love. I'll show you the first 3 pages of volume number 1. You get a feel for the art, and you can see Elle has got quite a temper. She either quits or is fired from her job in the coffee shop, Fine Bucks. She also has a heart of gold. She sees this woman is struggling to open her stroller and immediately gives her a hand. Then we meet Carole, the Cherish bot. Is a robot who is created for empathy. We see the planned obsolescence here in the life expectancy screen. We also see that Carole is a kind robot. We see this mother who is impatient and doesn't want to be bothered by robots. The clash between humans and robots is definitely central to this storyline, with its themes of social class and social justice. You could compare it to Clara and the Sun by Ishiguro. And in volume 2, we really see how media is used to accentuate fears. Here's the mayor saying, "We need to find those 2 criminals, terrorists, fugitives, commies, find out which term sows the greatest fear in the people, and call in our best bounty hunter." So by the end of this volume, it's starting to look like the Wild Wild West. And next up, I've got something else that's quite different, and that is Murder for the Modern Girl by Kendall Kulper. This is set in 1920s Chicago. There's a paranormal aspect. We've got another star-crossed lovers romance. Ruby, who can read minds, and Guy, who can change his appearance, transform. There's the criminal underworld and high-stakes action. Social justice is definitely at the core of this one as well. And I love the book design. This is an original painting done for the cover, which really suits it. And then the Art Deco fonts on the inside are absolutely gorgeous. Look in that epilogue, the O and the G, and then in the drop cap there, the R for Ruby, the triple bar column for that R, the circle, and the kick of the R going into that gorgeous spiral. Whew. So pretty, so pretty. And I enjoyed the story too, which is a YA novel. I actually am reading it for my YA book club, which is later this month. And the next book I'm telling you about is also a YA novel, Aces Wild by Amanda Dewitt. And the audio is read by Robbie Daymond. This one is definitely just for fun. It's about a group of teenagers who know each other through an asexuality online chat forum, and they get together in Las Vegas. There's a lot of teenagers who are experts at blackjack and Texas Hold'em, which makes me roll my eyes a bit. There's a secret stash of blackmail, that information that is kind of a plot point, which is also a plot point in Murder for the Modern Girl. The hook for me with Aces Wild is the asexuality of the characters, and in particular there's a romance between two of them and how confusing that is for them. So that's what kept me reading, and I'm glad. Not my favorite book, but I'm glad I read it. And next up is another audiobook. This time I picked it up because it was the winner of the Odyssey Award in the juvenile category. That's the American Library Association Award for audiobooks. Stuntboy in the Meantime by Jason Reynolds. And the audiobook is read by Guy Lockard and a full cast with all kinds of sound effects. So high energy, so much fun. This would be great for family listening. The intended audience for this book is quite young for Jason Reynolds. I don't know if he's written anything else that's for such a young audience, but I would say age 7 to 11. Stuntboy is the greatest superhero you have never ever heard of. A black boy who lives in an apartment and his parents are fighting all the time. That's the meantime. And when that happens, Stuntboy gets the frets. So with his anxiety and his parents' relationship, you would think with these serious topics, it wouldn't be such a fun, light book. But it is. It truly is. I would compare it to Captain Underpants and maybe Diary of a Wimpy Kid in terms of appeal. And last up, my favorite book out of all of these is another audiobook, Strangers to Ourselves, Unsettled Minds and the Stories That Make Us by Rachel Aviv. This is a book about medical ethics and what we don't know about psychosis. Aviv frames this with her own experience at 6 years old when she refused to eat and she was diagnosed with anorexia nervosa. And as an adult, she questions that diagnosis and what kind of impact that sort of labeling has on a person. So she profiles just a few people in this book, including an African American woman, Naomi, who felt terrified for her children because she knew their life would be filled with inferiority, indifference, and ridicule. And so she threw them and herself into the Mississippi River. So one of the things that's explored in this section about her is the connection between people who are mentally ill and imprisoned, and just how many of those people are imprisoned instead of being treated for the mental illness, and also the way that Naomi's paranoia has an honest basis in our culture. In a different story, the one about Bapu, who was living in Chennai in India, the author explores how different cultures have different frameworks for socially deviant behavior. I just found the whole thing entirely fascinating and thought-provoking. And that's all I have to talk about today. It's a lot, I know. Thank you for sticking with me to the end. I am going to include a little bit about my craft project this past week. If you want to watch for a little bit longer, I had been saving avocado pits and shells in the freezer, and I had accumulated quite a bag full of them, and so I made a dye bath and dyed some alpaca yarn, and then there was still seemed to be some color in the dye bath, and so I dyed some cotton and some linen just to play with. And that's it. Thanks again for watching. I look forward to talking with you in the comments below. See you next time.